Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this presentation webinar on issues with the retirement and education support professionals, put on by the OEA-R and the Advisory Council. We want to thank them for helping put this together and having the idea to inform you on retirement issues. This morning, you'll hear from Mary Vinegar, who is the chair of OEA-R Advisory Council. After that, we'll hear from Sylvia Johnson, PhD, who is one of our expert staff members at NEA. And she will talk to us about an issue that affects a lot of retirees called the GPO WEP. And some of you, I'm sure, are intimately familiar with that. It's a personal story. My mom is affected by the GPO WEP. She was a school secretary and now is a retiree. After that, at 10:25-ish, we'll have Richard Stensrud from the Ohio School Employees Retirement System, and he'll provide an overview of issues at STRS for our members of that system. Also, I think for members of STRS, it's good to listen in on that because all retirement systems, public retirement systems, are facing the same types of issues. So I think you're going to hear a common strain from Richard that we're going to talk about today. After that, you'll hear from Bob Stein and Rita Walters, who are the OEA endorsed candidates for the STRS Retirement Board in the upcoming Retirement Board election. Both Bob and Rita have been, as I said, endorsed every year. There's an election for STRS. The retired seats, there are 2 of them on the 11-person board, and those 2 seats come up every 4 years, and this is the year for that, and it's going to be a contested hot election, so want to give Bob and Rita a chance to talk about their candidacy with you. And finally, we'll have Bill Neville, Executive Director of the State Teachers Retirement System of Ohio, to present an overview of STRS, and afterward we'll have a Q&A session. And for the Q&A, we'll have you type it in the chat box. The panelists will be able to see it, and Bill will choose questions to answer as we go along, and we'll hopefully be informative in that regard. Also, if you're participating by phone, we will have a phone number where you can text questions to, and then after that, we'll close it out. So let me first introduce Mary Vinegar, the chair of the OEA-R Advisory Council, to welcome you here this morning. Mary.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad that you could make it today. This is our first attempt for one of these meetings. We hope to have several more. I want to just thank you all for giving your time up. I thank you for the panelists that have joined us today. Hopefully they will provide you with a lot of information that will help you as you think about and make decisions, especially in this upcoming election. And we just, please be sure if you have a question to type it into the chat box or to send that text so that your question can be answered. And with that, I will to begin our program.
Good morning. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to share with you this morning. You know, it's always a pleasure to talk to kids in our retirees about what's going on. Because oftentimes you're in DC, you're talking to people who don't necessarily, they're not on the ground and they don't necessarily have a grasp of what's going on the ground and how people on the ground are being impacted by decisions that happen in Washington. And so this morning I want to talk to you about GPO WEP, and I'm going to try to share my screen. I'm not too tech savvy when it comes to this whole thing. So let me see if I can share my screen. Share screen. Okay, now I have to find the document. Share. All right, and do this. All right, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, so again, this morning I want to talk to you about the government pension offset and the windfall elimination provision. And I would imagine that many of you on this call understand that these two provisions have had a negative impact on retirees, educators and other public service retirees over the years. And this is not new in terms of NEA's fight on this. We've been lobbying on this for a long time. I've been at NEA for 3 years, but even prior to long before I came to NEA, this was an issue, and the government relations team at NEA is committed to staying in this fight because it's unfair that public servants like yourselves have given so much, and then when it's time to retire, you get hit with this government pension offset or the windfall elimination provision. So let's talk about what they are. So GPO, as we refer to it, it affects almost 700,000 people. And many of these people are low-income people, they're education support professionals. And basically what it does is reduces a person's spousal survival benefit by 2/3 of a public pension. And so some people, almost all of them, 90% of retirees will lose their entire spousal benefit. And so an example, this individual, her husband passed away and she was able to draw some of his Social Security at 60 while she was still working. But she has to keep working in order to draw most of it, because if she retires, she could lose the entire spousal benefit or up to 67% of it. And we think that that is not fair. This is something that came along, I believe, during the Reagan years, and somehow it got posited as retirees who are public servants double dipping. Now, the last time I checked, I don't know anyone who's getting rich off of a public pension or Social Security. And so why Ronald Reagan thought that this was too much money for public servant retirees to have is a mystery to everyone. And then you have the windfall elimination provision that affects almost 2 million people who worked in jobs that weren't covered by Social Security. And again, this is one of those unfair things that came about because it reduces the person's benefit, in some cases by half. So if you have somebody who worked another job, maybe at a company, and then decided in their late 30s or mid 30s that they wanted to go back and get a degree and start teaching, and they contributed to Social Security in their other job that they had prior to teaching, and now they're getting ready to retire, or when they retire, they only get half of what they should because they were late starting in teaching and their pension also got reduced. Again, this is unfair. And we are pushing, trying to get this resolved. So you might ask, well, so here's a list of states where educators are not covered by Social Security. And so again, they're the ones who get hit the hardest by this windfall elimination provision in GPO. So you might ask, what is NEA doing about this? Well, there is a bill that gets introduced every Congress. It's called the Social Security Fairness Act, and it will fully repeal GPO and WEP. This year, it was introduced by Rodney Davis, a Republican from Illinois, and Abigail Spanberger from Virginia. Now, in the Senate, Senator Sherrod Brown, I talked to his office before I did this presentation, and I said, hey, is Senator Brown going to introduce the bill again this year? And they were like, absolutely. He's going to keep introducing this bill until GPO WEP are dealt with and put to bed. So you might ask, well, why is it that Congress won't just repeal it? Well, it's according to the Congressional Budget Office, the cost to repeal GPO WEP would be anywhere from $80 to $90 billion in a 10-year window. So we thought last year when the COVID package was abound, well, let's see if we can get it in there, since that was going to be a big bill. And we tried and we were not able to get it into the CARES Act. But again, we'll keep pushing because at some point we will have a group of people in Congress who think, okay, we need to take this up. And people have asked the question, is it going to be a priority in this Congress? We are going to push for it to be a priority, but the reality is, with everything being about COVID, it's hard to say. So what happened in the last Congress, the 116th Congress, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee introduced this Public Service Protection and Fairness Act. Now, this was what we consider to be a first step in the right direction, but doesn't go nearly far enough. But basically what it would do, it only addresses the windfall elimination provision. And they would have a new formula. And so current retirees would get about $150 more than they get now. Future retirees would get about $75 more, and no one would get less than what they're getting now. And the reason we supported this bill is because there have been previous WEP-only bills that would create winners and losers. So what do I mean by that? The previous bills that only addressed WEP would have given a bump in a benefit to current retirees of about $100, but then in exchange, it would subject 2 to 3 million future retirees to having to pay into or having to be penalized by WEP, who currently aren't penalized by WEP. And so we didn't think that was a good deal either. And so we supported this bill because, again, nobody would get less than what they're getting now. And we recognize that it doesn't go nearly far enough, but it has some potential to pass because the price tag is, I believe, around $30 billion versus the $80 to $90 billion. And so we supported this bill. It has not yet been reintroduced in this Congress, but I checked with the Ways and Means staff and they told me that Chairman Neal plans to reintroduce it this Congress. So who knows, maybe we can get the WEP-only bill added into a piece of must-pass legislation. And so that's kind of where we are with that. So, basically for you, the bottom line is that, these are penalties, GPO and WEP, and they hurt educators who dedicated their lives to public service. And we have concerns as we move forward because we think about future educators who this could be a deterrent to them. And so we try to educate our new teachers and educators so that they are aware of this, that they might get hit by it. And but the bottom line is we want to see this go away, and any incremental steps that can happen in the meantime, we're going to support those. But our real big push is going to be for full repeal of this awful, awful piece of legislation. And because we do know that, when you dedicate your life to public service, part of that dedication is, your love for what you do. But we feel like that when people dedicate their lives to public service, they deserve a comfortable and secure retirement, and they should not be hit with these penalties at the time when they are moving into that part of their life where their income is potentially drastically reduced. And so with that, I will take any questions that anyone has.
So if you have a question for Sylvia, you can type it in the chat box right now and she'll be able to see it. All the panelists will be able to do that. So if you could do that, if you have a question for Sylvia on the GPO WEP, and while we're waiting for questions to come in, I'll just say that, as I mentioned, my mom has lived the story that Sylvia talks about. She retired. My father passed away. He worked and got Social Security, was a Social Security recipient, and her income was clawed back 2/3 of what Dad worked for his whole life. and she's managed, but I mean, this is an issue that costs retirees who were both have spouses who worked in the private sector who passed on before, or who worked in the private sector prior to becoming a public school employee. Let me see if we have a question in the chat. Does this, Sylvia, here's the question. Does this only affect people in the states with independent pensions?
I don't know what you mean by
I
independent.
believe the ones that where, like Ohio is a state where the public employees are exempt from Social Security.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I was going to say it only impacts states we call them non-Social Security states.
Right.
And like in some states, like for example, in Georgia, not all of Georgia's state employees are exempt or non-Social Security. It's like in certain counties. So in some states, it's not the entire state, but it might be the county. So you are an educator or public servant for a county, you might get hit with GPO and or WEP. But if you're a state employee, you may not. And so in some states, it's a little bit more granular, and it's at the county, local and county level.
So Sylvia, there's another question in the chat, and it's from Tom Moskovic, and he tells the story of somebody who worked for 48 years, 25 in STR, well, 25 in STRS, 27 in Social Security, the only worker in the family. And the question is, and this must be a question that warms the lobbyist's heart, what do we need to do to get help on this? And she already
Okay.
a letter to Senator Brown.
So what you all want to do is, once, Mark, if you will keep in touch with me, and well, first of all, there's a new bill that will fully repeal the GPO and WEP. It's HR 82, called the Social Security Fairness Act, and it's in the House. So whoever's district you live in Ohio, call that member's office, write them, send them an email, call them out on Twitter, call them out on Facebook, and ask them to co-sponsor that bill. Because again, it would fully repeal GPO and WEP, and that's the bill that NEA supports. So that's the first thing you can do. And then as soon as Senator Brown reintroduces the Senate companion of that bill, I would recommend that you reach out to both Senator Brown and Senator Portman. Even though Senator Portman has announced that he's retiring, he still needs to hear from you about this because it is a big deal. Yep, HR 82, Social Security Fairness Act. You're on mute, Mark.
That is so, I thought that was 2020. I guess I'm going to the new year with this. HR 82, correct? And
yes.
Call your representative to try to get them to co-sponsor that bill to eliminate the GPO. That's the ask. There you go. You know, another one of our participants, I retired with 33 and a half years in education. My spouse worked under Social Security for 38 years, and upon his passing of leukemia, Social Security said that she received nothing of what he had contributed.
And this is a perfect example of the government pension offset, GPO, the spousal benefit. And again, we think that this is grossly unfair, because, you know, public servants, I mean, if you worked and paid into Social Security, or your spouse worked and paid in, you should be entitled to that money. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's your money. It's like you're putting money into a system and you're not getting your money back. And it just doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't. And it's actually quite, to me, it's a bitter irony that they call it a windfall. That's
exactly, because that's the point I made earlier. I mean, I don't know anybody on Social Security or any kind of government pension who's getting rich. I mean, not even close. And, you know, the whole point of Social Security was to help keep seniors out of poverty at retirement. And interestingly enough, I mean, for some people, you know, if Social Security is their only form of retirement income, and then part of that gets snatched back, that's, you know, that's not a good thing. I mean, people don't spend their lives working as hard as people have to work, particularly in the public sector, because I think you all are the hardest working people on the planet. And, you know, and then you get penalized, you get nothing in return. That just doesn't seem fair.
So one of the, when you look at the chat, there are tons of HR 82, which, and it's up in the chat. I'll retype it again. It's House Resolution 82 is the bill that we want our U.S. representatives. But I hear, I'm reading stories like another one of our panelists, or excuse me, participants said they weren't able to collect their husband's benefit and had postponed taking my Social Security, and my husband died in 2014 at 58 years old. She only did 6 months of his Social Security. Ways that representatives need to hear the personal stories of how it actually affects their constituents, and don't assume that this is a partisan issue. This is actually an issue that both representatives on both sides of the aisles, they support repeal. I talked to Dave Joyce, an NEA endorsed representative from Northeast Ohio, and he said, absolutely, I'm in favor of repeal. It affects police and fire as well.
Exactly. And I'm glad you raised that, Mark, because that is so on point. Your stories matter. And your stories move members of Congress more than data in many instances. And you're right, this is a bipartisan issue. And, you know, the thing that seems to also move the needle with Congress is for them to understand, and you just putting it out there, that if you don't have money to spend as a retiree, you can't help the local economy because you are struggling to make ends meet. And so you want to have money to put back into the local economy. And yeah, so share your stories. I mean, for Julia, please share your story. Kathleen, I recommend and ask that you both would share your stories. Like I said, send an email to that member of Congress with your story and talk about the importance of, you know, fixing this, because it negatively impacts not only you as an individual, but the entire community. Because if people don't have money to spend in the local economy, you know, that hurts the local economy as well.
Absolutely. We're going to wrap this up. I think we have a clear ask, Sylvia. Call your U.S. representative and ask them to support HR, not only support, but co-sponsor HR 82. I want to thank you, Sylvia, for bringing light to the subject once again. I think it's something to keep on the front burner and to have people continue to put pressure on our representatives in Congress to change. So appreciate you coming in this morning and joining us.
Sure. And before I go, I will say that this is an issue that Sarah Borgman is keenly aware of. And so you won't be alone in weighing in with your members of Congress, because like I said, I'm presenting to Sarah's group tomorrow afternoon. And so the NEA retired legislative committee and the entire NEA retired, they will be weighing in on this as well, because, you know, it's an issue in those other states. And so you won't be alone in this, and I will keep pushing this, as will the collective NEA. So again, thank you for inviting me, and I'm off to my next meeting for the day. But
thank you so much, Sylvia.
Absolutely, thank you.
Hope to talk to you later.
Okay, bye.
Next in our lineup, we are joined by Richard Stenserud. Richard joined SCRS as the executive director in 2017. He's the central point of accountability in all of SCRS's affairs, including investment performance, operational, and financial performance. So that is a big job. And before joining the school employees retirement system, Richard served as CEO of the Sacramento County Employees Retirement System. And along with serving as CEO, he was the chair of the legislative committee for the State Association of County Retirement Systems, representing over 20 retirement systems for the past 10 years. Before that, Richard spent many years in many places working in and on pensions and on advocacy for issues before state governments. We want to thank Richard for coming here to talk about issues affecting the school employees retirement system. And again, my mom is a member, so thanks also for coming here, Richard. And this is we have ESPs and teachers retired on the call. I just want to say that the issues that affect the school employees retirement system is of interest to everybody, not just the members of that system, because we're all in the same boat in public pensions. So I think it really bears your attention to listen to what Richard has to say today. And with that, welcome, Richard.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. Am I coming through okay on an audio basis?
I can hear you.
Great.
Loud and clear.
Great. I would begin first by just echoing the comments from the previous speaker about the importance of engaging regarding GPO and WEP. We also are very active on these issues. We feel very much the same way as you do. We think it's something that really needs to be addressed. And hopefully, maybe this time we can actually get some traction and get some things done. So we're in this with you on GPO and WEP. And as Mark indicated, so many other issues that we deal with at STRS are common issues across all retirement systems and certainly in the K through 12 education space. So what I'd hope to do today was to provide an overview of things at STRS. And hopefully, if you have any questions, I can answer them. But just starting first, like all the retirement systems, like all organizations, we've really had to focus over the last year on addressing the challenges of running your organization and serving your members in the way that you expect of yourself and that they expect of us, in the face of a pandemic that has really complicated the way that we traditionally do business. But I'm very, very pleased and proud to say that by virtue of the commitment of our staff, we were able to pivot pretty quickly to a largely remote operating model without sacrificing any of the expectations around customer service and timeliness of service. And I really have to give tremendous amount of credit to all of our customer-facing staff, as well as our IT team that helped us to take a decent platform and really power it up to be able to operate remotely and to do so successfully. Now, that being said, we hope to and are beginning the process of a phased return to on-site operations. We want to do that in a way that is going to be prudent and safe. And so we are optimistic that the introduction of vaccinations, the hopefully reaching the peak, the worst of the contagion rate is going to be in the rearview mirror pretty soon. And we're looking forward to bringing people back into the office and to complement our on-site presence with some ongoing remote work. In the end, I expect we will take the lessons that we've learned from the pandemic and operating in the pandemic and really take a look at what that means for the way that we do business going forward. I suspect that that model is going to look a little different. But certainly one thing that we were in the process of doing that we'll pick up the pace on is sort of changing our philosophy and approach to member services, which is instead of trying to draw customers, members, and retirees into STRS, literally and figuratively, we're really going to be, I think, changing the focus to becoming stronger and more adept at pushing STRS out to our customer base so that it's just easier for you to be able to access what you need from STRS and get your questions answered. The pension fund continues to be in a very stable and solid position. Our funded status has improved a little bit from last year. We're now at 71.5% funded status, which is solid. We are comfortably within the statutory 30-year window. In fact, we are now at 24 years and declining in terms of addressing and bringing ourselves up to 100% funded. This, among other things, has allowed us in 2021 to be in a position to turn on the COLA again after a 3-year COLA suspension. It is a very modest COLA. It is a 0.5% COLA for our retirees. That number was decided upon based on the statutory parameters that define what the COLA will be. But we are at least pleased to be giving something back out to our retirees. Look forward to continue to being able to provide COLAs going forward. We are what's known in the retirement system world as a mature retirement system, which means that everybody looks like me. No, that actually everybody looks a lot better than me. But by mature retirement system, it means that that we have reached a point where we are paying out more annually in benefits than we are drawing in annually in the form of contributions. This is something that happens naturally with retirement systems as you grow and mature and evolve. And it is something that we have planned for, and is something that we have a plan for. We are able to comfortably cover that gap between benefit payments and expenditures, drawing upon the investment returns and investment earnings. And so we regularly keep an eye on that, though, because we know that that is something that can ultimately impact the long-term health of the fund. But it is also something that, again, we believe we have a good plan for addressing. One thing that does, though, is that's a drag on our ability to grow the fund. To the extent that we are taking investment income and moving it from the investment side of the ledger over to the outgoing benefit side of the ledger, it slows our ability to grow the fund. Again, we're still seeing nice, modest growth, but we've done a recent analysis where if we weren't cash flow negative, our funded status would be up in the mid to upper 90s. And we're not alone in that regard. Again, that's a common phenomenon for mature retirement systems. But then again, we are in the business of paying benefits. So that's a sacrifice that we're happy to make and that we have a good plan for addressing. On the healthcare side, also good news to report, we have improved the funded ratio of our healthcare fund from 21% to 27%. The solvency of the healthcare fund is now out 34 years to 2054. While these numbers may seem modest relative to where other systems are with respect to healthcare, it wasn't that long ago that our solvency period was down to a few years and our funded status was down in the single digits. So we're very pleased with the fact that we've been able to introduce some innovative programming, generating some cost savings on the healthcare side that allow us to be cash flow positive in the healthcare fund out of 7 of the last 10 years, and allow us to grow the healthcare fund and keep it strong. This is important because, as I think many of you realize, our members are generally the lowest paid workers in the school systems, and therefore drawing the lowest benefits out of the school retirement system landscape. So being in a position where we can provide a material cost subsidy program for our retirees is important. And also important is for us to be able to continue to be a plan provider, offer a plan in the pre-Medicare space, which again, as everyone probably realizes, is the most challenging space in which to both obtain and provide healthcare. So that is something that we are continue to strive to be in a position to do, and thus the strength of the healthcare program is enabling us to do that. Now, while we are in a good position, we believe, on both the pension fund and the healthcare side, we know that this is not fixed in stone. We know that things can change that would cause an erosion of the strength of these programs. And so for that reason, for more than the last year, the Strs board has been engaging in a sustainability analysis on both the pension fund side and the healthcare side. And the purpose of that is to understand both where we are, how we got here, what the risks to sustainability are, and steps that might be considered in order to strengthen sustainability. The board has wanted to do this from where we are today. That is a position of relative strength, because the board believes that it is much better, easier to reach sensible, thoughtful, and have sensible, thoughtful discussion about these important topics when you're not in the middle of a crisis. And so the board has been sort of going back to basics, really rolling up its sleeves and understanding sort of where the plan is today, what our membership looks like, how the plan is working, and also how we got here. And so that has been something that has been going on, again, I said, for more than a year. All of this is taking place in open meetings, open session. We have all of the materials that have been generated, the minutes on those discussions, the materials that the board has considered in those discussions are all available on the Strs website. I encourage you to take a look. There's some very interesting information there. And because these discussions, I think, are nearing the point where they're going to move from concept to actual consideration of plan design elements, I would encourage you all to sort of take a look, get up to speed with the discussion so far. That will help you to understand what might be coming next, and when those discussions come, be in a position to engage, because that is the way that Strs always wants to approach things. We want to be transparent, we want to be inclusive, and we want to be proactive. And so as we, as I say, turn this corner and start to move from sort of concept to actual plan design, we are going to expand the outreach that we have with all of our stakeholders and partners, and get your voices heard in those discussions so that you can be in a position to make sure that your perspectives are heard and understood by the Strs board, that you have a voice in it, and that whatever comes out of those discussions, and there are no predetermined outcomes. That is sort of another element that I think is important to understand about this sustainability analysis is the outcomes have not been determined. And so, you know, while there may be some tough questions, the board is committed to wrestling with them, but doing so in partnership with our stakeholders the way that we always do. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So if you have a question, and this is going to be the case for all of our presenters today, if you would please type it into the chat and we'll try to address it as we can. The one question that I have though, Richard, is, you know, mature pension systems, as you mentioned, are where you're paying out more in benefits than you're getting in contributions from employers. And what that means is that the investments have to make up that gap. And in addition to that, you have to make enough to pay benefits for which you don't have the funding going forward, right? So you guys are 71% funded. That means you have to make up 29 cents on every dollar that are promised to your retirees. The question I have is, about what percent of your assets, you know, as a percentage of your assets, what is that cash flow gap?
Yeah. Right now, annually, we are looking at a cash flow gap, and I'm pulling up the numbers as we speak, of around $600 million. So it's not a few dollars. That is a number, that gap number has increased over time. I don't have the data right in front of me, but we actually have some information on our website in the sustainability section that sort of charts the evolution of the cash flow experience. And I want to say that we went to negative cash flow back in the late 90s. The data I'm looking at is from 2005. Back in 2005, that gap was about $99 million. So between 2005 and 2020, over that 15-year period, the gap has increased from basically $100 million to $600 million. So again, these are real numbers. And you know, fortunately though, along the way, the asset base that is used to generate the investment return has also grown. At that 2005 year period, don't actually have the asset numbers in front of me, but you know, we were obviously much smaller than we are today. So we do believe we're comfortable and confident that we have a plan. You know, one of the things that could really disrupt this whole equation, though, is if there was a material change in the size of the contributing workforce. If for some reason the STRS active membership declined by 10%, 15%, 20%, obviously the contribution stream would drop as well. And that would make dealing with that cash flow gap even more challenging. And so with that in mind, we've asked the actuary to provide us with modeling to show us what that experience would look like. The good news is that absent some sort of catastrophic event like that, the cash flow gap is projected to begin to shrink beginning in about 30 years. As the baby boom bubble clears and as presumably the workforce remains stable, the gap, cash flow gap is projected to come down, but it's a real number.
Right. So I just looked it up, and your assets are about $15.2 billion. So it's 600 million is the gap. What that means is, you know, about 1%, or, you know, just a little less than 1% of you have to make up through investments. And I was just thinking about that in comparison to STRS facing the same issues. And STRS has a cash flow gap of $4 billion. So that's, you know, a substantially larger amount to make up. I was just thinking of the relative health comparison between the two systems. On the sustainability study, okay, there is, on the sustainability study, so you are maybe considering plan design changes coming forward, the board is, or and what would be the process for that?
Right. You know, I think, again, the board has spent a lot of time getting to understand the fundamentals. I think now the focus will be what might be done. And I want to emphasize might. What might be done that would enhance the sustainability of the pension fund and healthcare program? The unfortunate reality of that kind of a question is that something like enhancing sustainability is rarely, if ever, achieved without some sacrifice by some people somewhere. And that's where things get very, very difficult, is in determining where you want to strengthen the fund and who is being asked to make those kinds of sacrifices. Now, few years ago, we did that with our COLA, and the COLA was suspended for 3 years, and it served the purpose of strengthening the fund. So that is something that shows that when you do make tough decisions, and we make those tough decisions, again, with a whole lot of discussion and engagement with our stakeholders, you can improve the sustainability of the fund. But as we look at sustainability now, I think that there probably will be a lot of consideration of I don't think it's going to be focused on retirees exclusively. I think that the looking at measures that might enhance the sustainability may need to consider things, different benefit tiers or formulas for new hires, probably more so than for existing members. But again, all of these things are very much in the beginning stages of consideration. And that's why I really do encourage everyone who is interested, who has a stake in the game, to watch. Our board meetings are streamed. You'll have an opportunity to see those discussions. There will be a ramp up of the engagement with all of our stakeholders as those discussions become more concrete. This is not something that there will not be something that will drop from the sky in March. This is going to take some period of time to work through, and then some period of time to work, hopefully in partnership with our stakeholders, to develop plans for taking it forward for implementation.
Right. Well, thank you, Richard, for spending this time with us this morning. We appreciate you dropping in and letting us know about the system. I really do appreciate it. And thank you for doing that.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time and for the opportunity to talk with you today.
Okay, so the next thing we have are our endorsed candidates, our OEA-R endorsed candidates for the retirement election in the STRS board. We give them a chance to talk to you. And then after that, Bill Neville, the executive director of the State Teachers Retirement System of Ohio, will be speaking and taking questions as well. So first, I will introduce Rita Walters. Rita's running for her second term on the board. She was a classroom teacher from 1976 to 2011 in Switzerland of Ohio schools. And she served on the retirement board since she was elected in 2017. She's earned the Certificate of Achievement in Public Policy Planning from the International Foundation of Employee Benefit Plans and has attended numerous professional development opportunities to expand her knowledge of public pensions. Rita is an active member of OEA-R and a respected leader, currently serving as the Eastern Ohio EA representative on the OEA-R Advisory Council. She brings a long portfolio of association leadership to the STRS Retirement Board. While she was teaching, Rita served as a local president for Switzerland of Ohio and served as their bargaining chair for 20 years, which for bargaining is a long stint. I can tell you that for free. And then she was president of EOEA as well and spent 12 years on the OEA Board of Directors. So thanks for dropping in this morning, Rita, to talk about your candidacy, and I'll leave it to you.
Good morning. I am currently serving as the chairperson for the Ohio STRS Board of Directors. And I want to take this opportunity to thank OEA for their endorsement and to thank all those individuals that signed my petitions and that work so diligently on my behalf. I greatly appreciate all your efforts. I also appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. This past year, the State Teachers Retirement System of Ohio celebrated its 100th year of existence. The current board works to ensure that the system maintains its solvency and continues to pay benefits for the next 100 years. The decision to reduce the COLA was made by the board in April of 2017 after the system had undergone its most recent quinquennial review. At that time, the board's outside actuarial firm, Siegel, made several recommendations to the board to stabilize the STRS Ohio Fund. At that time, the funding level was at 75.1%, and its funding period was at 18.4 years. In the 2020 State Teachers Retirement System of Ohio's comprehensive annual financial report, the funding period has been reduced to 14.9 years, and the funding ratio is now 77.4%. The stability of the system continues to improve. I know there are people who don't believe that the board even thinks about the COLA, but that would be wrong. We know that the retirees have been patient, and we understand how essential it is for retirees to have protection from future inflation. And we are working to find ways to do that without jeopardizing the stability of the pension. The board must work for the good of all STRS members, not just the short term, but for many years ahead. The stability of the system is the board's highest duty. I was sworn in as an elected retired member of the board in September of 2017. Prior to that, I attended the board meetings each month for 4 years before ever being elected in order to learn what the issues were that were facing the board. I wanted to be a knowledgeable board member. I felt that I owed that to the members. I was awarded the Certificate of Achievement in Plan Policy, followed examinations in pensions and healthcare. I've also attended Callan College since I have been a member of the board for further training. As members of Public Pension Fund Board of Directors, we are fiduciaries. We have a responsibility as an oversight board to make decisions based on what is best for all members of the system, both active and retirees. We are not required to be experts, but we are expected to be prudent and to make sure that we have hired experts in various areas such as investments, finance, actuarial, member benefits. It is our responsibility to ensure that those that we hire provide us with the information we need to make the best decisions for all our members. We have an outstanding staff. Last spring, when the governor asked all businesses that could work from home to do so, our system never missed a beat. The entire system had trained and prepared for just such a situation. All the preparing and planning paid off because associates were able to work from home and not miss a call, and no one missed a benefit payment. When I joined the board in 2016, the healthcare fund was funded at 54.7%. Today, it is funded at 180%. During that time, I have been on the board. We have considered a variety of plans to implement that would stabilize the healthcare fund. We selected a plan and the staff implemented it, thus increasing the fund from 54% to 180% in 4 years. The actuaries estimate that STRS Ohio will be able to offer health care for its retirees for the foreseeable future. These important changes just didn't happen. They happened when proper steps were taken to make a plan and to execute it. I ask for your support for another term as trustee on the STRS Ohio Board of Directors to ensure experience and continuity on the board. We know what it takes to stabilize the retirement fund. We are making progress toward that goal. I ask that you give me the opportunity to continue the work on behalf of all members, both active and retired, of STRS Ohio. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Next, we have Bob Stein. And Bob was a 27-year classroom teacher. He taught 4th through 8th grades in Strongville City Schools, and he has a variety of many other experiences. He's been a college instructor, licensed financial planner, and SEC registered investment advisor. He's taken numerous courses on investments, taxes, insurance, retirement, and estate planning, and has earned a certificate of achievement in public plan policy from the International Foundation as well. Bob has served on the STRS board since 2009 and served 3 terms as the chair of the board and vice chair of the board, while serving as either chair or as a member on every other board committee. Go ahead, Bob. Thanks for coming in this morning.
Thanks, Mark. Good morning. I'm Bob Stein. I've been on the STRS Ohio board for about 12 years and served board leadership for 6 years, 3 as chair. I've attended every STRS board and committee meeting since the winter of 2008. You can see bios for both myself and Ms. Walters at the bobstein.us website. The bios on the site address other topics as well as details relating to my comments here. I'm here to thank you for helping to save Ohio teachers' pensions and healthcare in the past, and to ask for your continuing support on the mission to improve benefits for all. The pension reform plans STRS made during the global economic downturn involved extensive research and advice from consultants and STRS members. None of these plans became law. It wasn't until OEA and other HPA organizations expanded their participation that legislation passed. Without your cooperation and diligent advocacy, the legislature might have acted in the interests of lobbyists rather than educators. Since then, Ohio teachers have seen difficulties, but they have avoided the ongoing disasters of the pension systems in some other states. In the last decade, the STRS board has continued to work to stabilize healthcare and other benefits. The STRS Ohio healthcare plan is now funded for at least 60 years, and premiums have been kept stable. STRS improved staff development and succession planning to grow and retain cost-efficient and high-quality internal talent. STRS used this talent to improve and formalize a variety of management systems, including an enterprise risk management program to keep the system operating smoothly without an interruption, even when affected by unconventional risks like social unrest and a pandemic. By a variety of objective third-party measures in all areas, STRS is routinely recognized as a model for outstanding governance and management processes. STRS customer service levels have ranked number 1 or number 2 against global peers for each of the last 20 years. I'm encouraged by our unique progress in development of our investment area. However, stabilizing and improving the total value of STRS benefits is a challenge. For all the successes and improvements, it was still necessary to set future COLAs to 0% to control the growing risk to pension benefits and previously awarded COLAs. These actuarial risks are largely outside of STRS control. They come from the recognition of new economic realities following the global economic downturn, as well as the number of STRS retirees growing much faster than the number of contributing teachers. In a risk situation like this, successful investments will be the foundation of any benefit improvements, including the future restoration of COLA. STRS has never stopped working to improve investment performance, even though STRS is already internationally ranked as one of the most cost-efficient systems in its peer group. Other investment topics are outlined on my website as well. Improving benefits requires the ability to make integrated policy for an extremely complex organization, a system that faces challenges unique to the pension industry. There may have been a time when single-issue candidates, professionals from unrelated fields, or even interested novices could have served as effective board members. No more. To keep your pension safe, to improve benefits in the current environment, for STRS to accomplish its long-term mission, we must elect board members with certificated training from institutions that are internationally recognized for their expertise in investments, pension plan policy, pension governance design, and pension system management. Only the OEA endorsed candidates have such certificates, training, and experience. No other candidate approaches this standard. To protect your pension system, you must involve yourself in this election. At minimum, you must promote and vote for people who have relevant experience and training, people who have already demonstrated a commitment to strengthening your retirement system. Thank you for your endorsement. Thank you for your professionalism. And thank you for your service.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate it. And yes, I will echo Bob. In order to be able, if you've ever talked to an actuary about pensions, you have to be able to understand what they're telling you. And both Bob and Rita have taken a ton of training to actually understand when actuaries talk to them or when investment experts talk to them about things like the efficient frontier of investing. They know what that means, and it's a very steep learning curve to be on the board. And I thank both of them for their service and for running again. Next up today, we have our Executive Director for the State Teachers Retirement System of Ohio. Bill Neville was selected as the 10th Executive Director of STRS this past June. Before becoming STRS Ohio's Executive Director, Bill served as STRS Ohio's General Counsel for 16 years. And prior to that, Bill was Associate Counsel at the Ohio Public Employee Retirement System. Bill's extensive experience in public retirement systems makes him well-positioned to lead STRS Ohio in achieving its mission and vision. So thank you, Bill, for coming in this morning, and I'll toss it off to you.
Thank you, Mark, for that introduction. Thank you, Mary, for inviting me to speak today. I'm trying to share my screen as I speak. Hopefully I can do that. How's that? Can everyone see my my PowerPoint?
We don't have you yet there.
Not yet. Okay. How about now?
Now you're in.
Great. Again, thanks, Mark, for the invitation. Thank you all for joining us. I'm glad I'm not traversing icy roads in Ohio this morning, but I look forward to a time when we can all meet face to face and eye to eye. Zoom's a nice compromise, nice fallback for an in-person meeting, but I would vastly prefer to be speaking in front of you today. As Mark said, I can't believe it myself, my experience with public pension plans, and even before I was with OPERS, with representing the Ohio Public Employees Deferred Compensation Program, goes back over 20 years at this point. Today, I want to give you a brief history of STRS, a few impressions I have of the system from my new chair, my relatively new chair as Executive Director. Talk about some of the funding challenges we all face together, touch on our investments, a little bit about the oversight STRS has from statewide elected officials and from our board and from outside experts. I'm going to look ahead 12 to 15 to maybe 18 months down the road at some of the reviews and the audits that we will engage in that time, and hopefully some of the data we'll receive from those reviews. I've gotten a few questions in advance of the meeting from some of you participating today. I've tried to work in those answers to this presentation. And then, of course, as Marcus said, I'm happy to take questions through the chat function as well. So I promise we're not going to go year by year from 1920, but let's jump back to 1920 quickly and touch on why STRS was formed. At that time, pensions were provided at the local level, and half those pensions at the local school level were insolvent. The other half were headed that way. So STRS was created to take on the responsibility of providing pensions to Ohio's public educators. And we literally took on the liabilities, and liability is a word you'll probably hear throughout my presentation more times than any of us want to hear it. We took on the liabilities of those school systems. In 1921, we had 34,000 active members with only 323 retirees. And those retirees' monthly benefit was an average of $41.55. Let's fast forward 50 years, we had about 123,000 active members and 29,000 retirees. So in 1970, 4 active members for every retiree. We had healthcare coverage in 1974, and the cost of healthcare coverage in 1974 was $9.7 million annual cost. Today, we have about $4 billion of our investment assets in the healthcare fund, a fund set aside specifically and exclusively for healthcare. So when we talk about investment assets, about $4 billion of that is the healthcare fund. Alternative retirement programs were enacted in 1997 for certain university faculty. And of the faculty eligible to make an election, whether to join STRS or join an alternative retirement program, about 40% of that faculty elects the ARPs on an annual basis. Defined contribution plans followed shortly thereafter in 2000. When we talk about our investment assets, about $2 billion of those investment assets are defined contribution plan assets. So about $4 billion in healthcare right now, about $2 billion in defined contribution plan assets. Today, we have about 178,000 active members and about 157,000 benefit recipients. As you heard Director Stensrud mention about SERS, we are also a mature system. And one of the elements of that maturity is we have just about 1 retiree for every 1 active member. Some good news, the average monthly benefit has moved up a little bit over the past 101 years. A career teacher currently receives about $60,000 a year on average in pension benefits. We are one of the largest pension funds in the US. As of June 30th of last year, we manage about $78 billion in assets. My educated guess is that we're probably closer to 88 billion right now than 78 billion, somewhere around 85 to 86 billion with a little more precision. Again, some 6 billion of those assets are healthcare assets and defined benefit assets. Also, another element of a mature system, we pay out about $7.5 billion a year, about $7 billion in retirement benefits, and about $500 million in healthcare coverage. So that's about $1.3 million every day in healthcare expenses. So that 1974 annual cost of $9.7 million covers about a week of healthcare today. Our cash flow shortfall, to speak colloquially, is about $4 billion a year as we take in about $3.4 billion a year in member and employer contributions. So we need just about a 5% investment return to break even from that benefit to contribution shortfall that we experience annually. Some impressions that I have as executive director, some of them new in my new role, even though I've been around for 17 years, certainly a different perspective I have in my new capacity. One thing I knew all along is that the retirement board focuses each and every month on the financial condition of the system. The board understands active members want to lower contribution rates. They want to be able to retire sooner. We certainly understand that retirees would like to have a cost of living adjustment, and we're cognizant of the fact that our employers want pension liabilities reduced. Each employer, each school currently reports its proportionate share of STRS Ohio's unfunded liabilities on their balance sheets. So I can only speak for myself on this. I've got my current chair, a past chair, and a past chair, and I can't see the participants, but I'm guessing there are probably a couple other chairs of the board out there as well. So I can't speak for myself. I can't speak for the board, but I promise you, in my heart, I know that this board wants to pay every penny to members that we can prudently pay. Prudent, and prudence is probably the key word in that phrase, though. You think about it, a teacher walking into the classroom today has a chance that she will have a relationship with this system that extends into the next century. So the long-term sustainability of the pension fund is absolutely paramount. Some impressions of our staff. A lot of us have teachers in our families, including as do I. So this is more than just a job for us. I have had one of my outside counsel refer to it as he perceives this staff as viewing it as a sacred trust. It is legally a trust. I hesitate to use the word sacred, but that is what folks who are close to the system feel about how this staff feels about our relationship with our membership, and it is true. About 2/3 of our staff have bachelor's degrees. About 1/4 of us have advanced degrees. Over 200 associates possess professional certifications like the CFA Charter, the CFA Institute Charter, or our CPAs. And we have, long before I got here, been recognized as an innovator in our industry, and we've ranked #1 in our peer group and for the last 5 groups in our customer service. So one of the questions I received in advance of this meeting is, why does the STRS staff receive COLAs? I want to make sure that I do not fail to mention that there are no automatic raises of any kind for staff. There are no COLAs for staff. Raises are based on the merit of each individual staff member. When I got here, we had over 700 associates. We have currently just over 500 associates. And anytime we have an opening, anytime we think we need a new hire, even if there's not a opening, my senior team and I sit down and we scrutinize that opening to make sure it is still a function that is necessary to meet the best interest of our membership. So you have my word, we will continue to hold the line on staffing. You have my word, again, this is what I feel, this is my opinion only, not the opinion of the board, that raises, merit-based raises for staff are necessary to attract and to retain the qualified staff that we need, that I need, that the board needs to protect all of your interests going forward. Some of the funding challenges we face, it's not all bad news, but the challenges do remain. Last June, we received a report in October that as of last June 30th, we were at 77.4% funding. And it's probably about a 14.9-year funding period. It is not completely accurate to say we can compare this to a mortgage, but that's a little bit like having 15 years left on our mortgage before we can pay it off. In this case, the mortgage principal amount is the amount of benefits that we have, that we're obligated to pay our current set of members. As of June 30. I think it's an educated guess, we are probably somewhere north of 80% today. That's not bad news, it's good news, but staff still estimates the pension fund faces a 29% chance of dropping below 50% funded at some point in the next 10 years. One additional bit of data on that, a 1-year drop. So if we have a 1-year investment return of a -5%, our funding period increases by 10 years, so jumps to about 25 years, and our funded ratio drops 10%. one other statistic, one of the other questions that I've received is essentially why can't we afford a COLA, or why aren't we paying a COLA? Let me give you a little bit of data on the impact of the COLA. A 2% COLA results in about $12.79 billion in liabilities to the system, and increases our chance of dropping below 50% funded ratio at some point in the next 10 years from about 30% to something right around 50%. So paying a COLA increases the chance of dropping below 50% funded to just about a coin toss at some point in the next 10 years. Looking at our investment portfolio, we do have a diverse portfolio that helped us weather the COVID-19 storm. We have domestic equities, international equities, we have bonds, we have real estate, both real estate directly owned and real estate investment trusts. And we have a growing alternative investment program and some liquidity reserves or cash. Of course, we have to pay out, as I mentioned, about $500 million a month in benefits. So it is a diverse portfolio. Through December of 2020, the fiscal 2021 return, or that return since July 1st, 2020, is about 15.9%, with the majority of that coming since the month of November. Now, that's good news, very good news. But let's pause to reflect. Last March at the lows, we were down in excess of 10% for fiscal year 2020. And our funded ratio was something closer to 67%. So we are very susceptible to the volatility of the public investment markets. Another question I've received in advance: why do we pay bonuses to investment staff? STRS manages about 70% of our assets in-house, and this method saves us about $100 million a year versus what it would cost for us to send that same pool of assets, let's say, to Wall Street. And that $100 million savings is the savings after we pay all the staff salary and all the incentives. So why do we pay bonuses? Because having in-house investment talent is a very efficient way for us to run those assets. And the bonuses are, again, in my opinion, necessary to attract and retain the investment professionals we need to run that amount of assets, billions of dollars of assets in-house. Now, expenses are one side of the equation. Let's take a look at the other side of the equation, the returns. Our investment performance has been quite good for a number of years, for quite some time. Callan, our retained investment consultant, reports that the STRS Ohio investment performance has ranked in the top 20% of Callan's public fund universe for the 3, 5, 7, and 10-year periods ended September 30th, 2020. And in the 7 and 10-year period, we were actually in the top 10% or the top decile of those funds. As of the end of fiscal 2020, so as of June 30th, 2020, our 5-year return was 6.91%. That outperforms our benchmark return of 6.6%, adding about $550 million to the fund during that period. I think some more good news. Our healthcare program, as Ms. Walters and Mr. Stein have both indicated in their comments, is in good shape. As most of you know, no employer contributions are currently used to fund the retiree healthcare program, but it is currently funded at about 180%. And that means if all our assumptions are met, as the actuaries project them, the healthcare program would be sufficiently funded to provide coverage for all current members. So if we meet all of our meet all of our assumptions, the actuaries tell us that our healthcare program is funded in what they call perpetuity. Also, as most of you know, many of you know, the board was able to return $200 per enrollee to our healthcare plan participants in December. And we have held the line on the costs to our healthcare enrollees, with some 90% of health plan participants experiencing little or no increase in deductibles, out-of-pockets, or premiums in the last 6 years. Another question I've received in advance is how will STRS handle what I believe is being referred to as a forensic audit that's been talked about a lot lately. Honestly, I probably have less information about this review than many of you do. It is not a review or an audit that's being sponsored by STRS. And I'm not sure what the process or procedure for that review will be just yet. But what I can tell you about is the oversight, the layers of oversight to which STRS is subjected on a regular basis. The Ohio Retirement Study Council is the committee of the legislature that provides oversight to STRS, including fiduciary audits of all the public pension systems, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. The Treasurer of State custodies STRS Ohio's assets. They're not literally here in the building, they're custody with the Treasurer. The Auditor of State oversees an annual financial statement audit of STRS, and the auditor is in the process of selecting a new financial statement auditor for the system as we speak. We have an internal audit team that reports directly to the board's audit committee. And speaking of the board, I'd be remiss if I didn't say the board oversees staff. They set policies, they set the asset allocation, they confirm compliance with policies, and they meet roughly 10 times a year, and some of those meetings are for multiple days. Investment performance is not calculated in investments, it's calculated in our finance department. And we have an external firm that verifies our investment performance and has been doing that annually for quite some time. That's the oversight, layers of oversight. Let's look ahead to what I would say is even more oversight, more confirmation of our financial condition. Starting late summer, early fall, we will kick off 2 studies that I see as dovetailing together, and that is the Actuarial Experience Review and an Asset Liability Study. I'm going to guess both those studies will wrap up in the early spring of 2022. With the Actuarial Experience Review, our actuaries will take a look back at the last 5 years at all of our economic and demographic assumptions and let us know what our actual experience is compared to what we estimated back then. The board may well need to reset some of those economic and demographic assumptions based on that review. And if the board does change those actuarial assumptions, it could impact our funded status. Perhaps most notably, our projected investment return is one of those economic assumptions. Dovetailing with that, based on that, moving contemporaneously with that study will be an asset liability study. And that is key to setting the asset allocation based on the level of risk that our outside consultants and our inside staff think is reasonable. Also this year in calendar 2021, I expect, based on conversations I've had with the director of the Ohio Retirement Study Council, that the council will at least kick off a fiduciary audit of the system. That fiduciary audit's a ton of work. It goes on for months and months and months, but it looks at really every aspect of the system's operation and critically reviews the organizational design, the structure, and the practices of the system. I think also simultaneous with that review, the Ohio Retirement Study Council will conduct a review of our auditor, of our actuary, Chiron. So we'll have one audit from ORSC looking at how our operations are, giving us advice on how to do better on those. We'll have another audit confirming that Chiron, our actuary, is doing a good job in telling us what our assumptions need to be or what our financial condition is. And I think we probably have those studies wrapped up in the next 12 to 18 months. I can tell you as a new executive director, I very much look forward to what those studies will tell us and how working with the board, the staff can set the course of the system for several years to come. So as those of you who know me know, I tend to jot down things that I read or that I hear that make an impact on me. And one of those statements I read several years ago really resonates with me as I look at how to manage a public pension fund, a mature public pension fund, in these tumultuous times. And that phrase was from P.W. Huntington, the founder of Huntington National Bank. The phrase is, in prosperity, be prudent, in adversity, be patient. So as I've said throughout my presentations, our assets, our financial condition is moving in the way that we hoped it would, but we are still vulnerable to downturns in the market. We're going to receive a lot of data, a lot of empirical data in the next 12 to 18 months that will help the board, working with staff, set the course of the system. And I would ask you all, be patient with me, be patient with us. Let us compile that data so we can make prudent decisions for the benefit of all of our members, and both active and retired. And with that, I will test the limits of my technological ability and try to get back to the chat.
Thank you very much, Bill. I appreciate it. And we do have a little bit of time for Q&A. So if you would make sure that you actually put your questions in chat. For those of you participating by phone, if you want to text your question, we'll give you a number and we'll try to get to it. It's 937-360-1554. Again, that's 937-360-1554. So a couple of questions that came up in the chat to start things off a little bit, Bill. Well, on one of them, you kind of touched on that. And I guess the question is, why can't we cut the budget of STRS so that we can pay a little bit of COLA? That's the first question that I got in there.
So the operating budget of STRS is roughly $100 million. The COLA creates a liability at 2% of $12.79 billion. So there is no way to reduce the operating budget sufficiently to pay really even a modest COLA. The quantum of the budget, it pales in comparison to even a modest COLA.
Right, just as on scale, if you took the amount of benefits that STRS pays out in 1 year, and if you shut off the lights and fired everybody in the building, you would only pay 1 penny on every dollar of benefits that STRS pays each year. It's just a matter of billions versus millions. Let's see, the next question, I mean, how do you see COLA going in the future? That was the question that another one of our panelists asked, is what is the future of COLA? When, I guess the question is, when would you even consider paying it?
Well, what I can tell you is, sincerely, the board looks at the financial condition every month. I know anytime I speak to a board member, COLA is one of the topics we discuss. The motion that reduced the COLA to zero said the board would look at the COLA not later than the quinquennial review we anticipate being done in March of 2022. So I'm trying to see the future 15 months out. I would expect there will be very formal discussions about the COLA no later than March or April of 2022. And certainly, again, we look at any number of ways we could provide some inflation protection for our current retirees. The question is simply, do we jeopardize the long-term funding of the retirement system by providing inflation protection too soon? I think our actuaries would tell us these early dollars, saving these early dollars is very, very important to build the resilience of the system. Is very important to build that up before we start paying some kind of inflation protection again.
Yeah, and on that score, in terms of being able to provide some sort of inflation protection, Victoria Eckhart brings up a point. She says, thank you for keeping the healthcare costs steady and the healthcare fund well funded. And she said, if my healthcare costs avoid large increases, then that's a gain that's kind of like a COLA because it doesn't erode your income as much when healthcare costs stay lower. So I don't have any other questions here, and we're nearing the end of our time. Mary, did you get anything? You're on mute.
That's right. I didn't get anything, but I did notice there was a question about would we be able to get a copy of your PowerPoint to share?
No problem.
Okay, thank you.
If you would send me the PDF of the PowerPoint, and then I'll ship it to Mary and she can distribute it.
Thank you.
So that concludes our presentation here today. Before we sign off, I just want to remind you that you may be getting a link to a survey in your email. Just try to gauge your pros and cons on the presentation today and things we can do to make it more accessible to you. This has been recorded. We're going to figure out a way to make sure that it's viewable by others. And I will leave it to Mary to close things out and say so long.
Okay. Thank you all for participating. This is a new area for us to be working in. So we appreciate everyone that was able to participate today. If you have other questions, please send them to us. And thank you all, the panelists, for being here today and giving such wonderful information. Hopefully we can spread this information as we further talk and work on the STRS campaign for Rita and Bob. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Bob and Rita. And thank you, Bill, for coming in this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, all.
Bye. Okay, I think we're done.
Hey, Mark,
Yes.
can you see my picture?
Yeah, I can see your picture, but I think in the webinar format, if your camera isn't on, then people can't see. That's what I got from a couple of panels. I did put something in the chat that said that your camera wasn't working, that your audio.
Yeah, I saw that, but I just wanted to know if you, because I don't have a camera. And so I just, set this up. So, with a Zoom thing, and I wanted to get a clue about that. Is there any chance that we could get the video of Bill's presentation? Like you have a recording, so we could just edit the thing so that maybe we can put it on the website, the STRS website. I don't know. I haven't talked to anybody else about it.
I have the
Yeah, we are going to have recording available, and we haven't figured out how to get the link out or where to house it or anything like that, but we are recording it.
Okay. What do you know what format it's in?
No, it's whatever Zoom stores it in.
I think Zoom
Okay.
converts it to MP4,
Okay.
but I'll be doing that afterward. It's going to take a while to run the conversion with this long of a file, or this large of a file. But I should be able to pry out just the part that you want. If you're just looking for Bill's part.
Yeah, well, even if STRS doesn't post it, I'll put it on my website, and we'll see how that goes. But all right, well, yeah, thanks for doing this. This was cool. All right. And if you're going to do another one, give me a couple days notice if you will. And then
We'll do. Yep.
all right. Thanks a lot.
Bye, Bob.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you, Mark, for all the help. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I think we can cut it off. We still have 14 on, but I think we can finish it up.
All right, will do.